Hello and welcome to the first video for B5 and B6 revision. It's the first of 3 videos on these topics, and in this video we're going to look at pathogens and disease, and particularly how they are spread, how to prevent the spread of pathogens, viral diseases, bacterial diseases, and some fungal and protist diseases. And as always, there will be questions throughout the video, so you will need to pause to answer the questions. So first up, we're going to have a look at how pathogens cause disease. And we're going to look at bacteria first. Now we have here a bacterium that is in our bloodstream. We can see the bacterium here. It's got its flagella and it's got its DNA just loose within the cytoplasm. We have our body cells here that all have a nucleus. Now this diagram is not to scale, obviously. Now the bacterium will enter our bloodstream or our bodies, and they can release toxins. Those toxins are what make us ill. Release those toxins which will affect the body. They are effectively a poison and will make us ill. Now we only have one bacterium at the moment, but bacteria can divide rapidly through a process called binary fission. And that reproduction is a form of asexual reproduction. We will get each bacteria will divide in two, and it can happen very, very rapidly. And each of these new bacteria that have been formed can again release the toxins that make us ill. We're now going to have a look at viruses and how they can make us ill as well. With a virus will infect a particular cell. So we have one of our cells here. We'll use one of our white blood cells, so part of our immune system. The virus will come along and will bind to the surface membrane, or the proteins on the surface membrane, and will release its genetic material into the cell. Once inside the cell, it will reproduce and disrupt the cell's function. So viruses reproduce in the cell and disrupt the cell's function. After a while, the cell undergoes a process called lysis, which means to split. The cell will split open and release all of those new viruses into the bloodstream, where they can go and affect more cells. We're now going to have a look at protists. The most common protist is one called malaria. Now, malaria is spread by mosquitoes, which are insects that will land on us and bite us. They will spread the protist into us, which can then cause us to become ill. Malaria will affect the red blood cells and it will cause the red blood cells to burst and the liver to stop functioning properly. We're now going to look at fungal infections. The most common fungal infection is called athlete's foot. Someone with athlete's foot has fungal spores on their feet that take away any of the nutrients from the cells on the foot. Now, with someone with athlete's foot, if they walk on a surface with no socks on, the fungal spores can be left on that surface. It then means if someone later on comes to walk on that same surface barefoot as well, those fungal spores can then be spread back up onto that person. We're now going to look at vectors. So a vector is anything that transmits a disease to an organism. So a vector is anything that transmits a disease to an organism. And we're going to look at the different ones there are. So first up, we have water. So here we have a glass of water. And in some water, there are pathogens inside it. Those pathogens, if drunk, will enter your body and can make you ill. We're now going to look at airborne pathogens. We have a person here. Now, if they sneeze, those pathogens can spread out in droplets in the air. If we had another person who is nearby, they can inhale those pathogens. They inhale those pathogens, it will then make them ill as well. And next one we will be looking at is food, particularly uncooked food. And this is most common in chickens and poultry. And those birds can contain the pathogens as well. It can be in any food, can have pathogens in them. When they are killed, if they are not cooked properly, then it can spread the pathogen into you when you eat it. And that can then make you ill if you ingest that pathogen. And next one we're going to have a look at is something called direct contact. And this can be in a variety of ways. It can spread if you touch someone else who has the illness. The pathogens can then spread from one person to another, such as athlete's foot if you're touching a surface that's already contaminated, or someone else's foot when they have athlete's foot. It can also be spread through sexual intercourse, when if any of the fluids pass to each other, can pass on those pathogens, which is why we suggest wearing condoms to prevent any sexually transmitted diseases that are again passed on through direct contact. Can also be spread through the use of sharing needles in intravenous drug users, where the pathogen is taken from one person's blood and inserted into another one's through use of reusing the same needle. I would now like you to answer the 5 questions on screen. You should now only be watching if you have completed all 5 questions. The answers are on screen now. We're now going to look at how we can prevent the spread of pathogens. And our first one is through vaccination. So we're going to have a look at what happens in a community that has had the majority of people vaccinated and one that hasn't. Now we're going to circle in green the people that have been vaccinated. If we have a large number of people vaccinated, we have herd immunity. We can then see that if the pathogen affects this one person here and it tries to spread to other people, we cannot spread to them because they have all been vaccinated. So herd immunity stops the spread of a disease through a population. We'll now have a look at what happens if only a small number of the population have been vaccinated. If we now have the pathogen and we affect this person here, the pathogen or the disease can spread very easily from person to person. anyone that has been vaccinated will not get it, but those people who have not been vaccinated will get the disease, and it could prove fatal to the population. We'll now have a look at isolation. Now, if we have a member of a population who has the pathogen and we want to stop it from spreading to other people within the population, we can isolate them. By isolating them, we stop the spread of the pathogen from one person or organism to another, as there are no vectors transmitting the pathogen from one person to another. So isolation, there are no vectors to transmit the pathogen. Next, we'll look at controlling vectors. So our vectors are anything that transmits a disease. With, for example, water, we can treat the water. We can make it so that it is safe to drink. With food, we can cook the food thoroughly, and that will destroy any pathogens that are in it. It would help if I spelled thoroughly correctly. There we go. With our insects, so for example our mosquitoes or ticks, we can kill them. We can use mosquito nets to stop them biting us. And we can destroy their breeding grounds. By destroying their breeding grounds, they are no longer able to breed, and the population will die off. Finally, or next, through our airborne diseases, we have the phrase catch it, bin it, kill it. And that phrase, we stop the airborne pathogens spreading in a tissue, we catch them in a tissue, put it in the bin, and we then kill it through either washing or sanitizing our hands. Finally, through direct contact. There are numerous ways that it can spread through direct contact, but for having sex, we can wear condoms. If someone was to be using drugs, they can always use a new needle, or a new clean needle. And they can wear protection on their feet if they have athlete's foot or verrucas, for example, to stop the spread there. Another way to stop the spread of pathogens is with hygiene. The most important part is washing our hands. By washing hands, we remove the pathogens. Through removing the pathogens, we can no longer pass it on to another person through direct contact. There are now 4 questions for you to answer. Please pause the video to answer the questions. You should now only be watching if you have answered these questions. The answers are on screen now for you to mark it. We're now going to have a look at some different diseases. First, we're going to look at some viral diseases. The first one we will look at is measles. Now, someone with measles will present with a rash on their skin, and a fever. Now, we cannot treat measles with antibiotics because it is a viral infection, so it can only be treated with painkillers and some antiviral medication. And it can spread from person to person through droplets in the mucus that is coughed out. So they can cough out those pathogens in mucus, which can then be inhaled. We can prevent it through vaccination. If we vaccinate a large number of the population, it will stop measles spreading. And there have been numerous times where the cases of measles has gone down, however, it has risen again because less people have been vaccinated. Next, we will look at HIV. Now, HIV is another virus. This time it is spread through either sexual contact or through sharing of needles. Now, HIV will infect the white blood cells. So it will infect white blood cells and cause them to not function properly. Now, our white blood cells are part of our immune system. And they help us to fight off any diseases that we do get. If they no longer work, we cannot fight off those diseases. HIV is spread through unprotected sex or through sharing of needles. And we can prevent HIV through the use of condoms or through making sure that drug users use new and clean needles. So we prevent it by using condoms and clean needles. And next one we're going to look at is one called tobacco mosaic virus. Tobacco mosaic virus affects plants and it can be absorbed up through the roots and into the leaves, where it causes discoloration in a mosaic pattern. Once it has affected a plant, it can be passed to another plant through human contact. If a person touches one plant and then touches another plant, they can spread the virus to another plant. It can also be transmitted by aphids, which are little insects that feed on a plant. They will carry the virus to another plant. So it can be transmitted through the soil, through touch by humans or animals, or through an insect such as an aphid. The treatment for tobacco mosaic virus is to remove and destroy the affected plant. And this will stop it spreading to other plants as well. There are now 6 questions for you to answer. Please pause the video and answer the questions. You should now only be watching if you have answered all questions. The answers are on screen now. We're now going to look at some bacterial diseases. First off, we're going to look at Salmonella. Salmonella is more commonly known as food poisoning, and we typically get it from eating undercooked food, particularly poultry, such as chickens. If you have Salmonella, you will have a temperature, a high temperature, or a fever. You will also experience vomiting, stomach cramps, and diarrhea. The treatment for Salmonella is antibiotics. We're now going to have a look at gonorrhea and what gonorrhea can do. So gonorrhea is a bacterial infection again, and it is sexually transmitted. Symptoms will again include a fever or a high temperature, pain when urinating, and a yellow discharge from the penis or vagina. It can be treated with antibiotics from a doctor. It's a bacterial infection. They can be treated with antibiotics. However, it is often more important to prevent the spread of it, so it can be prevented by using condoms during sexual intercourse. There are now 5 questions for you to answer. Please pause the video to answer these questions. The answers are now on screen. So we're going to have a look at rose black spot first for our fungal and protist diseases. This is a fungus that affects plants. And it will cause black spots to appear on the leaves of plants, and this stops them photosynthesizing. It can be spread through direct contact with an affected plant. The treatment for rose black spot is to remove the affected plant and treat it with fungicides. We're now going to look at malaria. So malaria is a protist. It is spread by mosquitoes. It's the protist that causes malaria, and that is Plasmodium. So when a mosquito lands on a person and bites them, it can spread the Plasmodium malaria into them, which affects the red blood cells and the liver. We can treat malaria with anti-malarial drugs, which disrupt the life cycle of the malarial parasite. And again, we can also prevent it. We can prevent it by using mosquito nets and by destroying the breeding grounds of the mosquitoes. By using mosquito nets and destroying the breeding grounds of mosquitoes, we stop the vector. So we are controlling the vector and stopping the parasite being passed on. You can now answer these 5 questions. Please pause the video to answer the questions. You should now only be watching if you have completed all 5 questions. The answers are on screen now. Please mark your answers. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a good rest of the day. Take care. Bye-bye.